Hey there, welcome back. In this video, we're going to take a look at my first shoot with this camera, the Canon R5. I've got them right here. Let's get started. All right, moving it here into Lightroom, you can see I've got a couple of test shots that I did here in the office. I will just go ahead and say, let's not import those at all. And what I did here with this other shoot, I went to a place called Strawberry Mountain, or the Strawberry Mountain Wilderness, and photographed a few of the items along Strawberry Creek there, the waterfall, and just a whole bunch of good stuff. So all these others are checked. They're going into my initial imports under the properly named folder. So I hit import, and then we will analyze these pictures as they come in, and of course we'll just take a look. This is my first shoot with this camera, so it's just all about getting used to it, seeing what it can do. This is something that, with the extra megapixels compared to my 5D Mark IV, I'm interested in seeing and understanding what it does and how it just handles these things. So I'm just really interested in looking at the details. I am going to, in this initial set of analysis, I'm going to be looking at the details, and we will also get into some processing too, because as I was shooting, I know there were some specific items I was like, I wonder how that's going to look with the polarizer this way, the polarizer that way. There's just different ways of setting that polarizer, different ways of shooting a subject, so we'll certainly look at a little bit of that as well. But really it boils down to the details of understanding how this camera treats the subject with this lens. It's a 24-105 lens, and just how it treats it, how it compares to my other camera. And certainly I'm going to think this is a good decision. We'll have more megapixels, newer technology, all that other good stuff. But let's just see what is in the details, shall we? Okay, we've got our first few images coming in, and so I'm going to go ahead and start taking a look. It's going to be running pretty slow as I'm not only recording the screen, but certainly the import process is happening too. And then, with all the other wonderful things. Now on this image, I was thinking this might make a nice black and white. This is actually right next to the lake, the Strawberry Lake. So it's not up there at the falls yet. This is just some little creek coming in, and then it dumps into the lake. And I really liked this idea here of this big massive trunk here, and then this fallen limb or trunk here with this one, and of course then the water flowing around and stuff. And as I was looking at it, I was like, I really think the black and white's would come out pretty good. One thing that I think is interesting, I did set the camera to crop this as a 1:1, and of course we're seeing it as a square crop. Let's go ahead and jump over to the develop module. And as I was shooting in RAW, you can see I still have all that information, but it did bring that initial crop information into Lightroom. That was one thing that I have just never done that before. So here we have it. You can see I can recrop if I needed to for any reason, but I set it up in camera this way, selecting the 1:1 crop. And it's kind of cool that it respects that. So that's nicely done there. All right, so as I'm kind of moving through, I did not put the polarizer on just yet in these sets of images. Zoomed in just a little bit there. Yeah, see how I got rid of that item up there in the corner? Probably a good decision. And then I took the cropping data, or the cropping setting, off. Yeah, it's coming okay. Maybe slightly overexposed on that one. And that's just something too, when you get a new camera, you really need to think, with what I'm seeing there on the little screen, how its histogram behaves and stuff like that. Just, what's going on there and getting used to some things. So certainly most of my images came out better, I think, in this regard here. But as we bumped the exposure a little bit, it's good to see the capabilities and the limitations. All right, here we go with some more detailed type shots. Experimenting with shutter speed, just trying to get the right shutter speed for the speed of the water. It looks like I settled there in the neighborhood of 1/5 of a second or so. Not too bad, 0.4 seconds there on that one. and the 0.8 seconds. Yeah, each one, it gives its own unique presence, its own unique sensation, texture in the water, and that can be interesting. Just depends on what you want there. Oh, this is hideous. Oh my goodness. Oh, I'm sure it was beautiful. This is at Strawberry Falls itself. By the way, both these last ones are at Strawberry Falls itself. And so there's different nuances, different places where it's cascading down. You have the main falls where it's coming down. We'll get to some of those in a minute. But then these are in the little cascade areas where it's kind of just going down the creek and tumbling down the hillside. I really was intrigued by this piece right here. But as you can see, I shot this across the frame so we could get a full-on panorama is what I'm trying to say. And I always overshoot these a little bit. You can see this little bit up here in the corner. I would crop that out in the final rendition. Let's go ahead and see what we can do. Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Just do these 3 pictures. We'll come here and do a photo merge and do the panorama. And this is a set of frames where I still didn't have the polarizer, so we see a little bit of those reflections, those sheens coming on, those glaring items. And I guess, you know, what it comes down to, in some senses, I kind of liked it because it gives form to those rocks. It gives a little bit of presence to those rocks. You can see the sun is just starting to come in a little bit. Probably we'll end up cropping that off a little bit. The main interest really is over here. So not too bad. So I think I will actually just totally get rid of that image, and then we'll just do these 3 here only. Yeah, not too bad. Probably still crop a little bit off of this because that little green is annoying there. But overall, yeah, things are coming fairly good. Let's take off the auto crop and see what's going on with that. Let's do a little bit of boundary warp. There we go. And then I'll turn the auto crop back on just so I can get rid of those little pieces there. All right, we'll hit that merge button and we'll move on. And as it's working, we'll just keep clicking buttons here and we'll keep moving on. Turned on the one-to-one cropping again in camera. Kind of wish I had shifted a little further over. Now here, I believe, is where I put the polarizer on. Let's take a look here. All right, in these shots, this is where I put on the polarizer. And you can see right here up in this area where I'm circling, where that water is kind of coming off the little lip there, the little ledge, it's going to change. Boom. Changes drastically. And changes drastically once again. And so we're just experimenting with the polarizer position. And what we usually try and do, take a look also down here in the green, what we usually try and do is maximize that green. So here the green is coming out really well. But then, you know, just so many other things going on with this image as we rotate that polarizer around. And what I got to thinking about was, would it not be cool? So let's take the 3 images. So there's very little difference between those 2. Let's take these 3 images and we're going to open them up in Photoshop. And I'm going to take them and open them as layers in Photoshop. And this is really just a test right now. I haven't processed these images at all. So this is just a proof of concept that I'm going to be showing you. If I like what I see, then I'll dive deeper with it and make it its own video all by itself, where I dive even deeper. But I just wanted to do a proof of concept here. And what I mean by that proof of concept idea, now that we're in Photoshop, I just wanted to see what it would take, because what we're looking at here, we're looking at different effects of that polarizer and how it counteracts, how it cancels certain areas of the light, certain reflections of the light. And the idea of the polarizer, of course, is to minimize or eliminate all that glare. So if I'm getting different glares with different angles on the polarizer, then it might make sense to go ahead and bring those into Photoshop and then use the layer blend modes. I just need to do these top 2 layers. And I'm just going to go do a darken layer blend mode, and it's like I have the application all around. Every single one of those applications of the polarizer is now in effect. And by doing so, this is going to be the darkest for the greens as well. So those glare areas on the greens, those are going to go away. And then I get all that glare going away. And then only where there's consistency in the highlights throughout each of those 3 frames does that come through. So then I can then come here and I can turn these on and off, and I can say, you know, what what do I like here? What makes sense here with that? And maybe I could take this particular frame and put it at, say, 50% to bring it just some of the way back. And this way we can kind of take a look at what is the polarizer doing, and we can really customize how the image is coming together, how the image is really looking. And then down here, if we look at the green, we probably won't like what's happening in that green. I actually don't really care so much. It's not that bad. See, it's this one that I definitely want to make sure the green doesn't have its effect. So I like to keep that on and keep the dark green coming through. So let's turn this back on, and then we just have this wonderful application of all of these different settings of the polarizer coming through. So as I said, just a proof of concept. I wanted to see just initially what it looked like. I don't like the processing. The color temperature is way off, all sorts of things. This is just a quick look. I'm not going to even save these results. I just wanted to see what, when I was out there shooting, I was like, I had to try that. And so I just wanted to prove it to myself if it looked good or if it was, a dumb idea. And I think it has a little bit of promise, so I will be exploring that a little bit later. All right, this little beautiful, tiny little leaf was so cool when I was shooting it. And the problem that I had was, movement a little bit because it's so close to the water. But then the flowing nature of the water was more just kind of flowing through. It wasn't crashing, so there was not a lot of air getting mixed in. So the overall nature of the waterfall just in this little area, just like, I don't think that's going to turn out so well. Especially when I really lengthen that shutter speed, it just goes really, almost like it's a formed molten plastic or something like that. That's just kind of weird. All right, not too bad there. Here again with that idea of without polarizer effect, with polarizer effect, and maybe something right in the middle actually would make more sense to do. All right, so here's the base of the main Strawberry Falls. And I was playing around with my composition a little bit, playing around with my exposure a little bit, trying to get it just right. And there we go with a slightly different shutter speed here. 1.6 seconds down to 0.4 seconds. I like this a lot better. We have some texture still coming through in the water. That definitely looks better, I believe. The water's moving pretty fast. It would have been, I had thought, it'd be nice to get out here and move this thing, but I was just like, nah, I'm not going to worry about it. Yeah, look what happens here between 0.4 seconds, it's just the different winds, how the wind is blowing and how it falls on the rock or it misses the rock. And so got a few shots here for doing a pano. I mentioned when I first started this, I would be looking at the details, and I haven't even done that yet. We will get to that in a moment. I just want to look through the rest of the initial shoot here. I do kind of like this where it stepped back a little bit, I think. We have a little more of that foreground presence, and then it's only 3 frames across. Oh, this was a lot of, I was just walking along the trail going up to Little Strawberry Lake, and this little thing was just right there. I was like, oh, that's so awesome. I have to shoot that. Just this tiny little piece of just a little bit of water coming through from a spring on up the hill. That's what I think really neat about this place is, and we look at the map, and there's just tons of springs coming out of the mountains, and then they fall down, they come into this creek, they make this big waterfall, they go to the lake, they go on down the mountain. It's just really cool to see how that all comes together. And I liked this framing. I decided to go vertical because I really liked just how those leaves were kind of tucking in and sort of hugging the region, the area of the waterfall. Now this shot is later in the day, and I purposefully left some things in here because I wanted to use it as an illustration, and I'll make it its own video, but I'll just point it out to you here once I figure out my exposure and things like that, and just how it's all going to come together. Oh, video not supported. See, I was going to get a video of me cleaning up the scene, but then I decided with my tripod just so incredibly precarious, I'll throw a picture here right now that I took with my cell phone. of the tripod, and just, I did not want to, as I was walking off the log, I was just like, you know what? I really need to not leave that there, because the whole thing is just shaking as I walk off the log. I was going to walk around and go and pick up these things. So let's see if you can notice what is different here. So from this image to that image, besides the framing. So, I removed the camera, I put the camera back on, besides the framing. But this is a much better, I appreciate this framing, this, I should say, this composition much better, because I got rid of this big old thing here in the flow of the water. That was just really disturbing my eye as I was looking at this. And then I got rid of this little thing down here, and then this little bit of dead foliage here. And so when we get rid of those items, we're just simplifying the scene a whole lot, and then I can work the scene a little more. And for some reason, the rotation information did not get translated. So let's do that. That's just good stuff. I think I can work, I need to work the cropping just a little bit, but not too bad. And then I decided I was going to go with a panorama type, a vertical pano. Oh yeah, that's good stuff. A few single shots, much more simplifying, again, where we get rid of this portion here on the left-hand side. Not that there's anything particularly wrong with that, but it just simplifies the composition a little bit and really focuses our energy on how these forms are interacting with the form that is created by the water. Oh, now we have another rotation, oopsie. Going back to the square format in camera. All right, a different framing. I really liked how this is coming in, but as you can see, I've got too long of a shutter speed. And so let's see, we're at, I can't even see what that is. Yeah, that says 1/8 of a second. And so to freeze those leaves, I then needed to, of course, make that a much shorter shutter speed. Well, now the water doesn't do what I want it to do. So I'll have another video where, I think anyway, well, if it works out, I'll have another video where I'm going to be working with this scene so I can blend all of these different water, those 3 water images, while keeping the one leaf image. As you can see, the leaf moves in the wind, so it's going to be a challenge, and it'll be interesting to see how this all works out. I think it'll work okay. In my mind, it's all beautiful and it's great, but we'll see what happens when we get to it. And I don't know, maybe I'll publish it anyway, because if it's a failure, maybe I can still publish it, and it'll make it for a good conversation anyway. Now, I really liked this framing because just these were solid. For some reason, the wind was not affecting these items so much, so I could lengthen my shutter speed once again. And then, of course, the composition with that log in the background and the water and the layering effect going on. There's just a lot of good stuff going on here. A little bit overexposed there. I like this one, that 1/4 or so of a second here, myself a little bit better, rather than 0.4 seconds. A little bit tighter, and then I think here we go, it's a little bit slower on the shutter speed, but here we go again with a little bit wider out and horizontal. Really liking how that log in the background is coming together. How this, it's not too bad. Looking forward to processing these images fully and making sure I have everything the way I need it to be. Now, let's take a look. Let's just go ahead and do this image. Let's take a look at some of the details here. I had mentioned I was going to be talking details. We are at f6.3, and we are at 35 millimeters and 320 ISO. So I'm going to be zooming in to 100% here and taking a look at, well, just what exactly is going on. What are we looking at with the sharpness, the pixels, what they're doing, where they're going. And as we can kind of see, we might have a little bit of movement in the subject itself. But right here, as we're looking in these moss and foliage areas, this is looking pretty good. I do like what I'm seeing there. Now, what I normally do, I have this apply to all my images. So let's take a look. Whoop, what did I do over here? Take off the basic, go to detail. And so I tell it to pull down. Adobe has a standard sharpening of 40. So let's go ahead and set this. If I double click it, it goes back to the defaults. So that is 40 and 25. I had pulled that down and I moved that up to 25 to 75. And so what I want to be able to do is I'm going to take a look at my history here, and I'm just going to now go back and forth between these two items and see if I see any difference. And quite frankly, I do see a slight difference, mostly because of that 40 being jumped up. And I'm noticing the difference here on this set of leaves, and I'm noticing it here and a little bit here as well. So because that detail, or that amount I should say, is bumped up, but nothing, let's just take this back. Let's just jump it to 100. There's a slight difference there. The point here on the detail is to counteract and get rid of the effect of the anti-aliasing filter that's on the camera. It's extremely subtle, but there's still a little something there. This is interesting because when I have my 5D4, I don't notice, now this is just one subject too, but I tend to not notice that much of a difference. So it's interesting, but that's why I like to tone this down a little bit, 25, and put that at 75. And then I'm at a pretty good starting point for all my images. So it counteracts that anti-aliasing filter a little bit. But then again, Adobe, they just tend to over sharpen things just a little bit. Certainly we like sharp images, but I want to be able to see that the image is sharp for it being sharp. I don't want to see fake sharpness. Probably the best way to put it. And when we overdo this sharpening amount here, you know, I'll go ahead and overdo it. Let's take this up to like 80. I mean, that just looks gross. There's, oh, I'll even go in a little further to 300%. And we can, I mean, that just isn't supposed to happen. So, you know, if we were to take this back down to their initial 25, you can see there's some effect where that anti-aliasing filter is blurring out that image a little bit. But I would rather have a balance of initial judgment. Take this back to 25. My initial judgment being based on pixel for pixel sharpness rather than overall image sharpness. And if I can do that, and if I didn't mess up when I shot the image, then I know whatever I can do otherwise is going to be top-notch technical quality, and then I can move forward and I'm able to process the image 6 ways a Sunday, and I have no problems with anything else. All right, so probably want to warm this up just a hair. And then I'm going to grab my whites and highlights probably and drag those down a wee bit. And then I think my greens, they just need a little bit of a boost. So I'm going to go to my HSL. I'm going to go to saturation, and I'm going to take my greens, and I'll go crazy. And we'll look at that and say, no, that feels like lemon lime candy or something. And then we'll scale it back to something that's more reasonable. And so that's a pretty decent starting point. You know, there's still lots more I need to do with some custom vignetting and things like that. But let's take a look at some of the other images. We're here to look at some details. Let's look at the center detail, or mostly center detail, of this image. Now let's back off. Let's just go to 300 or 100. Yeah, ooh, look at that. That's really nice, actually. Get in here where it's brighter and we can see a little more. Yes, that is really good. Of course, I expected it to be good. It's just, and what I mean by good, things are smooth. You know, I'm at 200 ISO. Things are very smooth. Things are extremely sharp. Very nice edges from these two very distinct elements. Let's go ahead and zoom into 300 again. And we're going to get the pixelation happening. But when we have that pixelation happening, we can start to see if we're going to have problems on our edges, because those anti-aliased edges, or those aliased edges, I should say, will have a little bit of a wave to them or some other kind of odd effect going on if there's some issues there. But, this is very smooth. And the overall just general cleanliness of the file. Let's look in some of the bright areas and see what we're talking about here. And with this, I'm just looking at how is it treating, the notion of the bright highlight areas. Again, very smooth. Now, I don't have any detail in those bright highlights, especially in the center, not in these images anyway. Let's take a look at this and see what we got here. Because with that long shutter speed, certainly it's going to be tough to really say, oh, this is good detail, that's, bad detail or what have you. But with my experience of looking at other waterfall images, this certainly is a very nice technical quality. And I'm extremely pleased with what I'm seeing, especially this transition to this log. And there's just nice little tight details that is just a little bit better than the 5D4. We have more resolution, so we should expect that. But when I'm looking at one-to-one pixel size, there's a certain level of, uniformity across the analysis of what I'm actually looking at and what I'm analyzing, because I'm seeing on my screen, when it's at 100%, I'm seeing 1 pixel from the camera, I'm seeing 1 pixel on the monitor. So it's not like it's having a greater blow-up effect or what have you of the subject like I would if I were to print these. If I were to print these, I'd then have a different ratio of magnification because I would be going to the same size print. I'm just looking pixel for pixel here. And when I'm looking at pixel for pixel and I'm just saying, hey, compared to my 5D4, what my memory is of my 5D4, there's just that, you can tell this is a 4.5-5-year-old, 5 years newer camera. And we would certainly expect that. It's just, as a recent convert to the machine, hey, I'm just pleased with what I'm seeing here. Now here we have some highlight details. Let's go ahead and take a look in the center, these highlight details on this log. And that is just very yummy, very, very good. Certainly a lot of this also comes from this lens. So the other lens I'm shooting is the 24-70 f4 on the 5D Mark IV. And so now I'm upgrading to the 24-105. This one's at 25 millimeters, so almost all the way zoomed out. And that's just really good, extremely sharp. Now, as we get to the edge, this is unfortunate, but we expect this on a wide angle zoom like this. All that detail is pretty much lost on the edge. Now, if I were to have, let's see, we're at f16. Yeah, there's not much else we can do here. It is a little bit blurry on the edges, and we just have to remember that when we're shooting some good quality detail type images, the edges, when it is zoomed out, at the wider angle, it's going to get a little bit soft. It's going to get a little bit just not as good. But when we're here in the center, that is really, and this is just natural characteristics of every lens. Every lens does this, but to the degree in which it does it, that's, more what I'm trying to focus on. How about this one at 50 millimeters? I'm picking up here in the corner. This is definitely better managed. We have less of that distortion in the lens that's causing it a little bit of, waviness in the subjects because we're zoomed out to 50 millimeters. And so we have greater sharpness across the field. And so, again, we expect that with lenses, but here towards the center, still very nice and crisp and sharp. And let's see, do I have any where I was zoomed all the way in? Well, 76 millimeters, 105 millimeters, but I really don't have anything with good detail in the corners at 105 millimeters. 53, yeah. So I probably can't do a full judgment on the lens, but, it is reaching the expectations that I had for it. And overall, I would have to say I'm quite pleased with the camera. Now, one thing also I want to talk about very briefly is going to be the shooting experience. With the flippy screen and the like, and the fact, of course, that it's a mirrorless camera, I don't have to turn on the live view like I have to do with a 5D4, and then it's, timed out and it just turns off and I have to hit the button again a couple times. So the overall experience for a landscaper is definitely, I think, a slightly greater, slightly improved. I did not shoot anything with this in this set of images. I did not use the viewfinder at all. So I only used that flippy screen. I do have a deep dive discussion on this experience of hiking and some of more of talk on these images, the specific nature of these images, and the experience of the camera over there on my podcast, Latitude Photography Podcast. And so I'll put a link in the description here so you can hop on over to that and listen to that podcast episode if you would like. So thank you so much for being here and watching. I do appreciate any comments you could leave. So if you've got the R5 and you've had some good experiences or bad experiences, or you've got some insight, because again, this is my first time shooting this camera. I need more experience shooting this camera so I can really sink my teeth into what some of the particulars are. But if you've got something to share, I invite you to share it in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and like the videos, and we'll catch you next time. Until then, happy shooting.